Hello there. In this video, I'll be breaking down how account authentication works in the World of Warcraft 3.3.5 client, and I'll also be showing how that login process can be implemented in a custom Unity client. Now, to demonstrate the login process, I'll go on to the retail client. Typically, a player would type in their credentials and press the login button, and they'll either end up on the realm selection window or the character selection screen like this. The authentication process is very quick, so it's quite hard to see what's actually going on underneath. So to better visualize it, we're going to repeat that whole process, but this time we're going to use Wireshark to monitor what's actually happening when you press the login button. So because I've got the server running on this machine, we're going to use the loopback option. We've got a filter going on right now for the port 3724. This is the port that the auth server is listening or can be accessed on. So yeah, that filter's running. So now, if we go on to the retail client, do the same thing again, and you may notice this time we've got some back and forth messages going on. So I will go into more detail about what is actually being sent here, but this is kind of like the core part of how the reverse engineering process is going to work. We're monitoring packets, essentially, both reading and writing packets. The point I'd like to make here is that at no point in these messages are we sending the password. So what is being sent is at least the username. You may see admin. Um, the password is also admin, but I promise you that's not the password. That's just the username. So that is the main thing. Like the password's not being sent. Instead, we're doing something to kind of obfuscate the password as we're logging in. So yeah, the client never sends the password. There's a challenge response exchange going on, and that proves the client knows the correct password. So now I'd like to do a demonstration of the same thing, but this time in the Unity client. The difference here is that I've added some logging to the console to better visualize what's going on. So let's go over to that. Let's log out of that. Go to the Unity client. So if we run this, we will type in the credentials, press the login button. Well, rather, the credentials already typed in. I'll just press the login button once Unity behaves. Here we go. So I press the login button, realm selection window appears, but we have a series of messages. It closely mirrors, well, it's pretty much exactly what Wireshark is saying, just a bit more stripped down and easier to read. Now, what happens once you're done with the login authenticating process is you're able to request the realms, or the client is able to request the realm list, and from there, the client can select a realm and then see the characters on that realm or create characters and such. So that's after the authentication process. So that is the demo. Yeah, so both the retail client and the custom client are communicating with the server, that being AzerothCore. Specifically, we're talking to the auth server. So the auth server is one of the processes of AzerothCore. So when you build AzerothCore, you'll have a folder like this, and that is the auth server there. It has a corresponding config file. One of the main things with the auth server is it's responsible for account authentication, as the name would suggest. So that's sort of like how you would start the process. The authentication process itself between the client and server follows what's called the Secure Remote Password Protocol, SRP. And for World of Warcraft, at least as far as I can tell, from vanilla, TBC, and Wrath, they follow SRP 6. So that's a specific version. If you want more information on SRP, there's a Wikipedia page here. At a high level, it's a bit outdated. It's got some flaws. People don't really use this, but it worked at the time. I mean, private servers nowadays probably still use this if they're lazy. If you actually want to implement this for yourself, I would recommend this article. It goes into much more detail, more on the cryptography side of the authentication process. Fun fact, the author of this write-up actually created a library, a C# library. I found the library first and used that, and then when I got stuck, I found the article. But yeah, I believe the authors made the library for other languages if you're interested. So yeah, that's the authentication protocol itself. But it is a bit high level. So now I'd like to go into the actual login flow and illustrate that. I put together a little diagram here. So this is a sequence diagram. It's something like a UML, but anyway, it looks complicated, but I'll try and walk you through it. So right at the start, the player would type in their username and password, and they press the login button, and they're doing that on the client. The client at that point is setting up a TCP connection with the auth server. And once that's been established, the client then requests the login challenge. That login challenge is, you can think of it like a puzzle. And so the client receives that puzzle. It will try to solve the puzzle. And to solve the puzzle, it uses bits of information. And one of those bits of information is the password. So with the solved puzzle, it sends it back, the login proof. The auth server does a similar sort of verification on its side. And the thing with the auth server is the auth server has access to the account's database. So it knows what the correct password should be. So it can use that password, do the same puzzle solving, and see whether or not the client actually has the right password. And so the auth server then responds back to say, yep, you have the right password, in which case you log in. If you didn't have the right password, it would just say, you had the wrong password. So that's the flow of authentication. So with that in mind, I'd like to move over to the Unity implementation itself. I would say that the main difficulty with implementing this is reading and writing packets. You'll see in the code. But there are resources out there. So the main one that I used was this article here on WoW Dev Wiki. It was how I initially started this project, going through this, making sense of the particular opcodes, and then on this wiki, it'll even go into detail as to how you should assemble it. Now, it is worth mentioning, this wiki, whilst it's really useful, there may be points where it's a bit incomplete. And so if you do run into that yourself, you'll need to look at the AzerothCore source code to see how the server expects the packets to be read. And you can even see the packets being assembled in the source code as well. So, but the wiki is really useful at a high level. So yeah, let's jump in to the Unity client and I can go through how it is all put together. So there's a lot in the project. I'm only going to go over what's necessary for the login process. So right on the first screen, we have this like login button. The login button is where it all starts, really. So we have the button. The on-click event is calling a particular script called the login view. Login view is responsible for the UI, like any callbacks that the UI may want to hook into. I put it here. So if we go into it, the function we're concerned here is the on-click login call, starting a coroutine to the game client singleton. Love singletons. The login call there. So the login call itself looks like this. We're going to set up a login session. We have the IP address. In this case, it's the local host, like the local machine. We have the port 3724. That's the same port we used on the Wireshark. Yeah, it's Wireshark. And then we have the username and passwords. This would have been provided from the input fields on the UI. And then once we've created the login session, we'll then authenticate it. So if we go to the constructor of the login session, the login session isn't a mono behavior, worth mentioning. Didn't need it to be a mono behavior. Instead, it's really just storing in the values that are passed in, and then within a try catch, we're going to have a TCP client set up, IP import, and then we're going to have the stream itself to read and write to. So that's communicating with the auth server here in this case. So once that's been created, we have the authenticate function itself. So this it's basically doing what we described in that sequence diagram, the whole sending a request for the login challenge, receiving the login challenge, and there's going to be a bit of the client proof is calculated when we receive it, and then we send the proof back, and then we receive the results of the proof. So let's just go into each function. So this is what the sending the login packet function looks like. Now, it's worth mentioning I made my own little class called the packet builder. This allows me to just have these functions like writing a certain type of data into it in a specific way, whether it's a single byte or an unsigned integer with little endian, or sometimes it's big endian. Yeah, that's a thing. So yeah, there's a series of bits of information that we need to supply it. Some of them can be zeroed out. Some of them actually have to be specific to, maybe the version of the client, like you may see it SUNE is the English US. But yeah, anyway, this is kind of what it looks like when you're building a packet, and then you'll be sending that off. But then when it comes to receiving a packet, it's a bit different. So first we make sure, do we even get any data? And if we do, then we kind of analyze it, each byte and maybe each span of bytes, to make sure it's what we expect it to be. Like server public key or like the large safe prime number. This one is more specific to the cryptography element of the authentication itself. This here, the SRP client challenge, this is where that library I mentioned earlier comes in handy. In the constructor itself, it does the client proof calculation, and that client proof is what we use when we send it back right here. So yeah, basically we send the proof back, we receive either a success because we did everything right, or we failed, and that will say so. Following on from this, we then go into the realm list and characters and such, but that'll be covered in a future video. But yeah, this is what the code generally looks like. So I will now go to the final screen. So yeah, in the next video, I'll be continuing on going over realm lists and character selection. But if there's anything specific you'd like to see in future videos, whether that be for the login process or maybe some other feature of the client or server, let me know in the comments below. I hope this was useful. If you like it, consider subscribing. But yeah, that's it for me. So thank you for watching.